So if I were to talk about being baptized in the Holy Spirit, would that make you uncomfortable? Would you get excited? Or do you have no idea what I'm talking about? I imagine that we have people listening today that fall in all three of those categories. So what is the baptism in the Spirit? Well, each of the four Gospels talk about it. The Acts of the Apostles talk about it. Jesus explains to his apostles that he will send the Holy Spirit upon them, that they will be baptized now in grace, right? It's no longer a circumcision that's needed to enter into God's covenant, that he actually wants to live in our souls. And Jesus' victory won that for us. He sends the Holy Spirit so that we can be redeemed, refreshed, renewed by God's very Spirit living within us. That's what the apostles are explaining to Gentiles and Jews, that this is the way into the life of grace and a life with God. Well, surely that's talking about a sacramental baptism, right? That's what we do commonly in the church. It doesn't make anyone uneasy, and it doesn't freak anybody out. But what is it that makes some people uneasy, or something that we don't understand? Well, when it's used in a more broad sense, right? Being baptized in the Spirit is used by like the Pentecostal movement, or even in the Catholic Church being used by Catholic charismatic renewal, right? It is a type of spirituality in which we're calling down the Holy Spirit to renew in us. That's why it's called the Catholic charismatic renewal, a renewal of the Holy Spirit and his gifts within us, because the Spirit is active. The Spirit is an active Spirit. He's not bored. He's continually working. And so it's a renewal. It's a calling down with our human freedom, asking for the Spirit's grace to refresh us, to renew us, to give us new life, to give us new gifts so that we can continue to evangelize and affect the church. So it's not something that's weird at all. It may just not be part of our spirituality or something that we're not comfortable with. Because sometimes the way in which it's received is when a team of prayers lay hands on an individual and pray over them. And sometimes they pray in tongues, which other people don't understand. And sometimes we think that might be a little bit weird. But again, it's a gift of the Holy Spirit. It might not be our spirituality, but it's a way in which we manifest the gifts of the Holy Spirit and continue to pass those on. And so when someone is prayed over, sometimes they manifest the gifts of the Spirit or being baptized in the Holy Spirit when they receive the gift of resting in the Spirit, which means kind of like it almost looks like someone is passing out, except for that they have all consciousness and they have a serene look of peace. And that's what they experience, a fullness of the Holy Spirit or a fullness of peace within them, an excitement, a fullness of life, right? And so again, it may look weird, but it's actually a great grace, and it's actually a really cool thing to be able to experience. And sometimes they manifest the speaking in tongues, which again is something that a lot of times we don't understand, but it's a manifestation of being baptized in the Spirit. The baptism of the Spirit is actually something really cool for our church. Why? Because it is a way in which it expresses that the grace of the sacrament that we have received has now come alive and has been refreshed, right? We can receive baptism, we can receive confirmation. But sometimes if there's an obstacle there, or if there's an unwillingness in our human freedom, the graces of the sacrament aren't manifest, or they don't take place, or they aren't lived out in the way that the Spirit intended them to be lived out. And so again, it's not something that we should be weird about. It should be something that we're excited about, and it should be something that we know about, even if it's not part of our spirituality. It doesn't necessarily entail that you have to be prayed over. It doesn't entail that someone has to speak in tongues over you. And it doesn't entail that you manifest any of those things. Really, the baptism of the Spirit at its foundational level is a combination of the graces that the Holy Spirit wants to continually give us, which is at all times, combined with our surrender and our docility of asking to receive those gifts anew, to be filled with the Holy Spirit, to have an experience of peace, to have an experience of being full, and have an experience of rejuvenation, that I want to live out the graces that the Spirit wants to give me for the good of the Church of Jesus Christ and in glorifying him. So today, let's not be weirded out by a baptism of the Holy Spirit. Let's ask for it afresh. Ask for it in your room today. Ask someone to pray with you today. Let's live out our faith. Let's not be afraid. We should never be afraid of what the Spirit wants to do within us.